Alright, good morning. The slabs have stiffened up a bit, and I think we're ready to go ahead and do the texture and the dish portion of our footed bowl. I'm spritzing these just a little bit so that they stay moist enough, but not too moist that when you touch them, your fingers dent the clay. So that's what we're looking for. I'll move my card over here. Alright, and what I'm going to do first is smooth out the slab. This one is going to do the texture, and this one is going to go onto this mold. You'll see that? Yeah, okay. So I'm going to clean it up. And I'm using a grid that I got at Trinity Ceramics. Unfortunately, they're kind of expensive and not really something that will stay in the studio long term, so I don't have these for you guys, I apologize. But for your purposes, we have this nice smooth rib, which works as well. To use these, you want to sort of do like a burnishing action. The point is not to scrape the clay away, but just to smooth the texture of the clay particles out. Get both sides. You need to be careful about getting these wall boards wet. If they get wet prolonged, it will cause the paper to pull away, which is starting to happen here. So after I get this slab onto the texture mold, I'm going to switch boards out so that I have a fresh board to put the clay on. Alrighty. And actually, after I get the clay rolled onto the texture mold, it's going to dry the clay out considerably because plaster absorbs water. Not to the point that you can't use it, but it will be not. You have to be careful that it doesn't dry out too much, especially if you're using this kind of texture. This is the corrugated texture that I like. And when you bend it, if it's too stiff, it's going to want to crack in these little divots. So be mindful. All right, here we go. Lay it out there. Going to want to go both directions. I'm going to go this way first. Be careful that you don't squish the edges, all right? Make sure that the ends get nice and squished into those divots in the mold. That's what imparts the texture into the clay. Leave it here for just a minute. Let it sit up, and then I will transfer it onto my board over here. So I can move that out of the way. And I will just set this aside. Then we're going to work with this one over here. Running out of space. First of all, I've got a piece of string, and I want to measure this, so about right there. You don't want to go over the edge. So that's how I'm going to run it. I'm going to mark my string and get a piece of craft paper. Sorry about that, I didn't have all the materials ready. So rough cut there, and then here it is. Okay, so that's how wide or how long we want our piece of clay. And that's a good size. Right there, sort of eyeball the middle. What we're going to do is do a little folding action and a rough guesstimate. And then once you have a template, it's real easy to make multiples of the same piece. And that's always a fun thing. Yes. So, those are the two marks on the lengthwise. There's the mark on the width. Do a fold and get your scissors out. Pardon the dogs, they're chasing squirrels. Alright, let's see how this looks. It looks like it will fit. Maybe a little long. No, I'm gonna leave it. You can always cut the clay down and make it smaller. So, all right. Good shape. So, this. Come here. Little one. Alright, so I don't know if you can see this, but this wall board left little dots all over the clay. So I'm going to clean it up real quick. Another good tip is if you get credit cards or gift cards and you've used them, they're no longer good, you can cut and make your own ribs. So these are great for when you're cleaning up these projects. And I will show y'all how to do that on a later video. Clay work takes, it's a process, and you have to let the clay acclimate, dry, whatever you want to call it, in between stages of working on it. And the drier it gets, not dry, the stiffer it gets, the more you can do with it. So I'm hoping to maybe get 2 out of these, or maybe do a couple little ones, I don't know. We'll see. So this is a fettling knife. They're great for working with clay. Especially for something like this. The cut doesn't have to be perfect. Like I said, we're going to trim them down anyway. But if you have a really large piece of clay and you drape it over the mold and it flares out, that edge is always going to be funky. So don't want that. See what I mean about the paper? Oops. So this is sort of a touchy thing. You kind of sort of feel the distance between the edge of the clay and the surface of whatever you're working on to tell if it's centered or not. And don't squish it so much that it folds onto itself. You want to gradually ease, let's see, ease the clay around that curve, like that. Also, you don't want to squish the clay onto the mold so hard that it doesn't want to come off. That's why we want the clay to be not soft, not totally plastic, not leather hard, it's just kind of somewhere in the middle. This probably wouldn't be quite ready for stiff slab building, but it works for this purpose. It's actually perfect. All right, so there's that. And then we'll transfer, actually I have another board over here. And be mindful of the plaster. You want to make sure you don't get the plaster into your clay. It could cause you problems later. There. I think it's about ready. So I'm going to wrap it up and keep it moist until we're ready to use it at a later date. Probably this afternoon. Maybe. Okay, so that's what it looks like. And the edges didn't quite do as well as I wanted them to. So where's my knife? There it is. Go ahead and just cut it off. And recycle that. Unless there are plaster bits in it, which there are, so we're not going to recycle it. Okay, so there's our texture slab for the foot, or any other additions you want to make on your piece. You could do pieces of texture around the rim if you wanted to. It's a lot of fun to play with. And when you're working at a home studio or in a small space, you really need to be mindful of cleaning up as you go and putting things away. Otherwise, you get kind of crowded on yourself. All my slabs, all of these are parts that I have left over from the big box I've been working on over spring break before we started this fun journey. And I'll show you those later. Shola, you had some questions about cleaning up, and I'm going to show everybody how to do that and make your pieces really, really sharp. So that's wrapped up. Make sure you always have the plastic when you're wrapping up the final wrap up, and you want it to stay at this moistness. Plastic goes between the clay and the board and then around the clay, because remember that these wall boards are gypsum and they will absorb water. So if you leave them for a prolonged time directly on this board, even if you wrap it up with plastic, it's going to dry out. So, okay. Next step, we need to smooth this out a little bit and make sure it is clean and will hold this shape. And I'm going to leave this on here after I get it smoothed out for about 2 hours, and I'll come back and remove it, put plastic on it, wrap it back up. Or if that's ready, I may start the next step for you guys. All right, let's smooth it out. Got this cake decorating wheel at Ace Mart, which is a restaurant supply place. And I get a lot of tools that I use in the studio, especially for hand building, at the restaurant supply. Got cookie cutters and cookie cutters. These are really nice. They're metal. So those are a lot of fun. Scales for throwing pots. All right. Paddle. Oh, look. It's a spoon. Another thing from your kitchen. This just sort of reinforces the clay to want to stay in this shape. The only downside of this thing is that it'll spin, so you gotta watch it. Once you get used to it, though, it's pretty nice. I'll use my rib to smooth this surface out. I'm going to worry about messing with the lip later. This is the lip part. And let this just set. Well, hello. Dogs came for a visit. They're loving this. Let me tell you what. You don't have to sit in a box all day long. Stella was a bad girl the other day, though. She ate a lasagna for dinner. Not good. All right. All right, my friend. Now, one more thing about the wall boards in your oh, not this one, though. This has texture on it. Actually, it'll probably be okay. You can stack them. So that's kind of nice. This can go on top of this one. I'm starting to run out of space with all my projects with all my different students. This is going to be interesting. I may have to get another cart for the line. Okay, cool. All right. So until we talk again, have a good day.